This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
What do you do after you've run a successful major retailer? You don't retire necessarily, you try something else. So what about being a life coach? Dai Manuel, author of the book Whole Life Fitness Manifesto, says he began his quest for physical and financial fitness as a teenager. He reveals his remarkable story in this edition of Bizgnus Interviews. Dai, let's start by you telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself.
Oh, geez. Wow, we'll start with the easy stuff. Okay. It's like who am I, right? We'll start with the big question. No, well, my name's Dai Manuel, and as we've alluded to, Dai's a Welsh name for David. My father's name was David, so to keep that confusion down in the household, they just referred to me by my Welsh name. I grew up outside of Toronto, and this is dating, going back to 1976. I was born there, so I'm 46 years young now, and proud dad. I have two beautiful girls, and they're now both, as of today, both young adults. My youngest turned 18 today, and my eldest turned 20 last month. And so it's interesting because we're sort of at that stage now where we're looking at what's life going to look like with the kids not at the house. And it's an interesting time. So outside of that, been dating my wife for 23 years and absolutely love her to death. We're not only partners in life, but everything else. And outside of that, I'm someone that just likes to help people with change. Navigate change.
And that is your business, helping people with change, I understand. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm going to throw down another reference to a movie, and it's a movie that I think probably everybody that's listening or watching will at least know what I'm talking about, but chances are they've probably seen it. Back in 1982, a movie came out, and it had a star, Harrison Ford, playing Indiana Jones. And if we remember the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, the very first 5 minutes, there's this scene with Indiana Jones trying to run with this idol in his hand and escape this boulder that comes barreling down at him, right? Yeah, we all remember that iconic scene. Well, most of us, when we think about change in our lives, that's what it feels like. It feels like we're running away from this boulder and change is going to barrel us over whether we like it or not. And so we have these sort of fears and apprehensions with anything that navigates change, both personally, professionally, and everything in between. And so I help people not only navigate change in a more positive, constructive way, but also to realize change can be fun. And also, I can be a champion or an advocate for change for myself, self-agency around change. And so these are the types of conversations, but also the systems and the structures that I provide people to help them facilitate change and not feel like they're getting bouldered over.
Well, if the boulder were following you, how did it push you into this line of work?
Well, as a kid, and I shouldn't say a kid, I was still a kid, at least mentally, but as an early teenager, I learned early on, my parents divorced when I was 9. And during that time, again, I'm dating myself here. So I'm a child of the 80s, and back then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of resources that were around, divorce. Like it wasn't a common, like today, the statistics, unfortunately, and I mean, I don't want us to go there right now, but when you look at statistics around successful relationships, there's more relationships that fail than succeed. But back then it wasn't the case. There was only one other kid in my class of 30 students that didn't have their original parents still together. So there was a bit of a stigmatization. And with that, I just really withdrew. I went inward because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to expect it. I felt really low. And unfortunately, Douglas, and I learned to deal with those emotions through video game playing, movie watching, as well as eating certain foods. And it wasn't like I was sitting saying, "Hey, Douglas, pass me some more salad, please." I was eating foods that were very rich in calories, yet very poor in nutrition value. And, that was 5 years of my life from 9 to 14. And by the time I hit 15, the doctor, during my checkup with my mom at the doctor's office, he's like, "Betty Ann, Dai is morbidly obese." And I was very overweight. My BMI was into the 40s, 40 percentile, and I was just very large. I was a very overweight kid, and based on that, all the cliches and stigmatization around that state of unhealth, that's just what my life was, And but then one day, I was like, I don't want to be like this anymore. I want to be healthy. And people often say, what was the motivation? I was like, well, I want a girlfriend. Like I did. I wanted to feel like somebody wanted me. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel wanted. And I really didn't see myself as having any value. But all that changed. I made a mental shift. I started to change some of my habits. Didn't happen overnight, but took about 20 months for me to release the weight.
You're a teenager when you're doing
Yeah,
this, right?
15 to 17 is when I made some really huge lifestyle changes, around food and nutrition and just the kind of stuff I would feed my mind with as well. I started looking for more positive inputs because as I've come to learn, and as we've all been reminded through various personal professional development programs, that what we feed in our mind often will produce itself and show itself in our lives. And that really became very apparent to me. And so I started to change the inputs in hopes that it would change my outputs and change my association, and all these little micro changes compounded into something huge. And by 17, I started having friends, my parents seeking me out to say, hey, Dai, we've seen you make these big changes and you've gotten really healthy. Like, I want to get healthy. Do you think you could help me? And Douglas, at 17 years old, I mean, I didn't see myself as someone that had a lot of value to offer, but all of a sudden I got this attention and I got this affirmations that I could. And it built my confidence. And that was my first taste of coaching and mentoring people through change, especially physical and mental changes. And I loved it. I was like, I don't care what I do for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this, and so I've been doing it since I was 17 and helping people. And I love it. I really do.
It is someone you would expect somebody advising others about their lives to have had a bit of a life of their own. How did you get over that itty bitty gap?
I think that's a great question, Douglas. It was I was helping people predominantly with areas that I had already started to facilitate changes in my own life, and that was around fitness, around nutrition. Those are the two mainstays, because that's really what created the most amount of physical change for myself and health changes. But the mental changes didn't come till later. So I wouldn't have qualified myself as a life coach back then. I mean, now I think that's sort of a catch-all term that could encompass what I do. I still think it's not broad enough, to be honest with you. Like I do much more than just support people with that, but I think it's a term that people can relate to now and understand. So back then it was more fitness and nutrition. So it was really health coaching, where now it's shifted into something much more. But it's because of my life experiences, between my last business, I did it for 17 years with a partner. We scaled that to 8 figures a year. It was omni-channel, so a big retail chain, and also on top of that, online sales and manufacturing. And so I've got my business chops. I got to develop that. And also during that time, I was also coaching and supporting people in my networks. And I never charged for it. It was always something I just like to donate my time to help people. And because I had this other business that provided for my family and I, so it wasn't like it was a necessity or a need. And so I got a lot of value from that. Ended up writing a book to also support people. Did my TEDx talk about 18 months ago, talked a bit about this and my own struggles with alcohol, especially. And 14 years ago, I made a decision not to drink anymore. And because my wife was quite good in asking me the question, Dai, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters? And when she asked me that question, Douglas, it was just like, it was hard to admit, but I wasn't being that man. If a man like who I was when I used to drink showed up wanting to get close to my ladies, I wouldn't have let them in the door. But yet that's what I was modeling. That's what I was saying is a man, a father, a business owner, a community leader. Like that's what I was modeling through my actions. And so I made some big changes, and those are actually some of the hardest changes I've ever made. Was moving away from alcohol. Like I didn't realize how much it had become such a crutch in my life.
Many people find that they have to have outside help to get off the bottle, and more importantly, to stay off of it.
Yes.
What have you done in that regard?
Well, you're absolutely right. That first 12 months, because originally when I made my commitment to stop drinking, I actually only made a commitment to go 1 year without drinking. And because at the time I just felt like that would be a big accomplishment, just to prove to myself and especially to my family that it wasn't something that I needed or wanted, but it was something that I could use and use it responsibly. And what I realized that though was in the first couple of months, I was like, holy smokes, I don't know if I can make it a year. Like I didn't realize how much of a release, at least a so-called release, it had become, at the end of a day, a big day at work and dealing with tough conversations or challenges in my professional life. Oh, I'll just have a couple drinks tonight just to take the edge off, and then it just became, it was like every night there was an edge to be taken off. Uh,
You
I
were a very well-rounded person by that time.
well, I was, but I wasn't, because I felt very like I was leading two lives. Here I am, someone that's very well known and well branded in the health and wellness space, holistic living, that really like living to be our healthiest versions inside and out. And yet on the flip side, I wasn't always honoring that for myself. So this imposter syndrome was a very real thing for me. This sort of constant mental beat eating myself up. And I needed help with that. And it was the first time I'd ever opened up with my wife and really told her how I was feeling inside, like the struggles I was going through. And God bless her. Like she looked at me and she listened to me. She took it all in. And then after it, she's like, thanks for sharing. I think you should speak to somebody. And that was the best thing she could have told me. The thing was, as much as she was saying that, is just because she couldn't be my therapist. She couldn't be my psychologist. She's my wife, the mother of my kids, partner in our businesses. Like there wasn't a hat that she was willing to wear. And to be fair, it probably would have ruined our relationship. So I found help, Douglas, and I worked with a psychologist for 3 months. I worked with a therapist for about 2 months. But by the end of that 12 months, my wife's like, hey, do we want to celebrate? Because you did it. And I was like, I can't believe I did it. I went a whole year without drinking, and she's like, do you want to celebrate? Maybe we can share a bottle of wine and watch the sunset tonight. And I was like, Christy, that sounds awesome. But you know what? So much has changed in the last 12 months in a good way. What do you think would happen if I kept going? Well, I'm almost at 15 years now. And I'll tell you, everything changed, Douglas. Everything changed. I said no to that one thing. It allowed me to say yes to the rest of my life. And it's been just so fulfilling ever since. And that's something I like to help people with as well. My TEDx talk talks a lot about this.
How do you help them?
Oh,
And especially, Dai, in these days of where most of our contacts are on Zoom.
oh yes. Well, there's been a bit of a break, but the men's groups are still going. I'm not participating myself in them fully, but they still run without me. And I was a co-founder of an organization called Mentorship Mondays, and just a little play on words there, but it's men's groups that meet Monday nights, typically over Zoom or in person when in some cities, like where we have them, they still meet in person. But men come to connect with other men, to practice opening up, talking about the hard stuff, but also celebrating the good stuff, because even as men, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, Douglas, like talking to some good friends, sometimes, as much as we like to talk about the hard stuff at times, talking about the great stuff that's happening in our lives, sometimes we shy away from that. And we shy away in concern that it's seen as bragging or boasting or trying to be something more than we are. But you know what? When I see a friend that's worked really hard for a big milestone or to land a big deal in their company, and then all of a sudden that comes through and the fruition of those seeds happen, I want to help them celebrate and acknowledge that. I'm happy for my friends for that success. But I wasn't always that way. I used to always feel threatened by their success or constantly think, why not me? Why them? Like this. And I realized it was just because I had challenges with myself, my own mental health, and I wasn't in a great place. So these men's groups are a way for us to practice safely to develop these healthier skills of connecting and communicating. And so that's one way that I love to support people. It's just give them a little invitation, extend my hand, say, hey, why don't you come check out this Monday night meeting? It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, and just see what you think, And fortunately for me, a lot of people say yes. They come and they check it out, and they keep coming because they see the value, right?
Dai, where do you hope to have your, I guess we'll call it a company in 5-10 years?
Man, who knows, right? Like it's like the way the world's going now. I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm currently the last 6 months I've come on I guess with a health tech startup company. And why I'm bringing this up is as I'm supporting them in this sort of next phase of their growth, it's a conversation that's very real because we're now working specifically in the AI space to develop something that helps people quantify change, behavior change, but more than that, understand what the data that we're always collecting in these activity bands and whatnot, what does it actually mean and how do we use it to create the changes that we all want to make? And what we're trying to create is the world's most robust health AI coach. So people can have access, anybody, anywhere, as long as they got the internet, can have a health coach. And so that's sort of our ambition. So this has been a conversation we've been talking about. It's like, well, 5 to 10 years from now with augmented reality, with a lot of these virtual devices now, it's like, I don't know what business is going to look like, but it's, if it goes the way I like it, before the pandemic, my family and I traveled the world for 5 years full time. And I was running my business because most of my businesses at that point were just online. So if I got an internet connection, I can work anywhere. And I used to love working at the beach, by the way. So that's where I'd like to see my business in the next 5 to 10 years is back on a beach. Let's say that.
There goes Tahiti, I guess.
You know what? I've never been to Tahiti, but I'd love to. I think that'd be a great place to go. We lived in Bali for 2.5 years, though, which is kind of close, another tropical island.
Yeah, exactly. I guess you've seen them all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Put on
Where,
your
where
sunscreen.
where can our listeners and viewers get more information about you and what you're offering?
Oh, well, thanks, Douglas. I'm a pretty social guy online, and it's the advantage of having a very unique name. Like I said, Dai, D-A-I, Manuel, M-A-N-U-E-L. It's just my name, but every social network or every online platform that I want to join, my name's unencumbered. No one ever has it because I've never met anybody else with my name. So if you can type my name into any social media platform, you'll find me, and it's just me. I always say, send me a message. Oh, I heard you and Douglas talking about this. This is my Indiana Jones change challenge right now, and I love having conversations with people. But Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are the 3 I'm most active on. And then my website, daimanuel.com, about 1,800 articles. I've been blogging for 16 years. And in those years, I've put a lot of content out on my website. It's just all geared to help people with change, fitness, nutrition, mindset, mental health, just all free resources that people can plug into. I like to warn people, though. It's the red pill, blue pill situation, what I mean by that is the matrix, right? Because health information is very confusing. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of misinformation, but it's also tough to know what's accurate and what works for me. What I mean by that is like each individual person's slightly different. So just because this solution works for your neighbor doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I really try to keep that filter in place when I'm sharing information to let people know, this is one possible strategy, but there's also these ones to consider, and there's no magic bullet out there if you want to get healthy. It's just getting back to the basics, bit of movement, bit of management around lifestyle and stress, eating good, healthy foods and getting good sleep. I mean, if you check those boxes off, don't worry, you'll be thriving. You'll be doing okay. And so I like to make things simpler for people.
And one last thing, what
Yeah.
would you like to talk about and add to this conversation that I haven't been bright enough to ask you?
Kind of you. And also, I just want to say I really appreciate you creating a space like this for these types of conversations. Because, as you mentioned, when we think about the news, right, like there's just a bit of an imbalance when it comes to the negative versus positive. And that's just the nature of that business. And then I look at this kind of content that you're producing. This is offsetting that scale, right? We're getting way more positive media out there through these types of platforms. So I just want to say thank you for allowing a platform like this to exist, but also for all the time and energy and resources you put in to make it happen. I know it's a lot of that goes in there, a lot of love, but it's not always acknowledged. And I just want to say I acknowledge you and see you, but also really appreciate you for doing it. So thank you.
You've been watching the Biznews Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.